Power is not born in crowns or thrones, but in the quiet calculations of those who dare to reshape chaos. In the early 15th century, a Florentine banker named Giovanni di Bicci de' Medici stood at the edge of a fractured world, seeing not ruin, but a canvas for his family's ascent. Europe was a tapestry of faith torn apart, with two rival popes excommunicating each other, splitting Christendom's soul. Giovanni, a man of modest origins, understood that in such division lay the seeds of opportunity, if only one had the audacity to plant them. The Medici were not nobility. They were money changers, their hands stained with the dust of coins, not the blood of kings. Yet Giovanni transformed their humble bank into a machine of influence, where gold became the language of power. A crisis of faith was no mere scandal. It was a marketplace of loyalties, and Giovanni knew the church's wealth was the ultimate prize. By backing a single pope, he could bind his family's name to the divine, turning faith into a ledger of profit. His gaze fell on Baldassare Cossa, a man whose past was as turbulent as the seas he once plundered as a pirate. Cossa's ambition burned brighter than his cardinal's robes, and Giovanni saw in him a partner to navigate the church's shadowed corridors. Cossa was no saint. His hands had gripped swords before scepters, his mind sharpened by survival in a lawless world. Yet, at the University of Bologna, he traded piracy for canon law, cloaking his ruthlessness in the church's scarlet. The year was 1410, and the conclave gathered, a theatre of whispers where votes were bought with Medici gold. When Cossa emerged as Pope John XXIII, the third pope in a fractured faith, the Medici Bank became the Vatican's pulse. This was no triumph of unity. Cossa's election deepened the schism, a wound in Christendom's heart. But for Giovanni, it was a masterstroke, securing his family's grip on the church's coffers and a foothold in eternity. What does it mean to wield power when the world you shape despises your methods? The Medici did not ask for love, only for the keys to influence, which they forged in the fires of a divided faith. Giovanni's ambition was not for himself alone. It was a legacy etched in the name he bore, meant to outlast his mortal years. As he aged, he groomed his son Cosimo, a man of quiet fire, to inherit a vision larger than Florence's walls. Cosimo de' Medici was no mere banker. He was a scholar of human nature, his mind a library of humanist ideals. When Giovanni died in 1428, Cosimo stepped into a city where power was a blade, and his enemies were sharpening theirs. Florence was a republic in name, but a battlefield of egos, where the Albizzi family ruled with an iron grip. Cosimo's rise, fueled by wealth and intellect, was a threat to their ancient privilege, a spark in a city of dry tinder. The Albizzi, led by Rinaldo, saw in Cosimo not just a rival, but a heretic to their order, a man who dared to dream beyond his station. In 1433 they struck, luring Cosimo to the Palazzo della Signoria, where betrayal waited in the guise of civic duty. Arrested and imprisoned in a tower cell, Cosimo faced the spectre of death, his family's empire teetering on the edge. Yet even in chains, he wove alliances, his wealth and charm loosening the council's resolve. Exile, not execution, was their verdict, a compromise born of fear, for Cosimo's influence stretched beyond Florence's gates. Rinaldo believed banishment would shatter the Medici, but he underestimated the man he cast out. In Venice, Cosimo did not mourn. He built his exile a forge where he tempered new alliances and stoked Florence's discontent. The city, under Rinaldo's heavy hand, began to choke on its own ambition, its people yearning for a savior. Rinaldo's rule was a house of cards, built on fear and exclusion, collapsing under the weight of his own missteps. By 1434, Florence's elite, desperate for stability, called Cosimo back, their cheers a testament to his enduring power. What is power if it cannot bend time itself, turning setback into triumph? Cosimo's return was not just a homecoming, it was the birth of a vision that would redefine Florence and the world beyond. He did not seize titles or crowns. Cosimo ruled through the illusion of a republic, his hand unseen but unshakable. Behind closed doors, he reshaped Florence's governance, ensuring every decision bore the Medici seal. Yet Cosimo's ambition stretched beyond politics. He saw art as the language of immortality, a way to etch his name into history's stone. He poured his wealth into artists like Donatello and Fra Angelico, igniting a flame that would become the Renaissance. The bronze David, sculpted by Donatello, was no mere statue. It was a declaration of Florence's rebirth under Cosimo's gaze. Each commission, each brushstroke, was a brick in the edifice of his legacy, a city remade in his image. The Palazzo Medici, designed by Michelozzo, stood as a paradox, grand yet restrained, a symbol of power that whispered rather than shouted. Through architecture, Cosimo crafted a stage where Florence could perform its greatness to the world. To rule is to create, but to create is to risk everything on the belief that beauty can outlast betrayal. Cosimo's Florence was a gamble, a city where art and power danced in delicate balance, each feeding the other. By the 1440s, Florence was no longer a city of merchants. It was the heart of a cultural revolution, its streets alive with ideas. Cosimo's patronage turned dreamers into giants, their works a mirror to his own relentless ambition. His enemies still lingered, plotting in the shadows, but Cosimo's power was now a fortress, built not of stone but of loyalty and vision. He had learned that true strength lies not in crushing foes, but in outliving their schemes. When Cosimo died in 1464, Florence mourned not just a man, but the architect of its soul. His son Piero, frail and untested, inherited a legacy that was both a gift and a burden, its weight threatening to crush him. Piero's reign was brief, his body betraying him as gout and illness sapped his strength. By 1469, at just 53, he was gone, leaving the Medici dynasty in the hands of his young sons, Lorenzo and Giuliano. Lorenzo, barely 20, stepped into a world where power was a flame, beautiful but deadly, ready to consume the unprepared. The Medici name was a beacon, but also a target, drawing the envy of those who craved its light. What does it mean to inherit a dream so vast it threatens to swallow you? Lorenzo faced a Florence teetering between glory and chaos, its future hinging on his ability to wield his father's vision. The Pazzi family, bankers like the Medici but burning with resentment, saw Lorenzo's youth as their chance to strike. Backed by Pope Sixtus IV, their conspiracy was a blade aimed at the heart of Medici rule. On April 26, 1478, in the sacred space of Florence's cathedral, the Pazzi struck during High Mass, their daggers finding Giuliano. Lorenzo, wounded but swift, escaped, his survival a spark that ignited Florence's loyalty. The conspirators' plan crumbled as Florence rallied to Lorenzo, their rage hanging the Pazzi and their allies from the city's windows. Lorenzo emerged not weakened, but as a symbol of resilience, his grip on power tighter than ever. To govern is to dance with death, knowing each step could be your last. Lorenzo learned this truth in blood, yet he turned tragedy into a mandate, ruling with a genius that masked his iron will. He created a council of loyalists, sidelining the Republic's old guard while preserving its facade. Taxes became his tool, rewarding friends, starving foes, and funding projects that won the people's hearts. Lorenzo's Florence was a stage, and he its director, commissioning art that spoke of divine beauty and human potential. In a young sculptor named Michelangelo, he saw not just talent, but a reflection of his own boundless ambition. Michelangelo's chisel carved more than stone. It shaped the Renaissance itself, each statue a testament to Lorenzo's vision. Under his patronage, Florence became a crucible where genius was forged, its light spreading across Europe. Leonardo da Vinci, too, found a home in Lorenzo's court, his sketches of machines and anatomy a mirror to the Medici's own relentless curiosity. Lorenzo did not just fund art, he unleashed a revolution of the mind, redefining what it meant to be human. By the 1480s, Florence was the envy of the world, a city where ideas danced as freely as its citizens in festival. Lorenzo's rule was a paradox, a republic in name, but a kingdom in spirit, its pulse, the Medici name. Yet power is a flame that burns its wielder as fiercely as its foes. Lorenzo's health began to fade, his body betraying the mind that had reshaped a city and an era. When he died in 1492, at just 43, Florence stood at a crossroads, its glory undeniable, but its future uncertain. His son Piero, unready and impulsive, inherited a legacy that demanded a strength he did not possess. The Medici had risen from bankers to architects of the Renaissance, their names synonymous with power and beauty. But as Florence mourned Lorenzo, a storm was gathering, one that would test whether their legacy could endure. What is the cost of building a world that outlives you, when the price is paid in the blood and betrayal of those you love? As the Medici saga unfolds, we are left to wonder, can ambition, once unleashed, ever be contained? Or does it consume all in its path? When a flame burns brightest, it casts the darkest shadows, threatening to consume all it once illuminated. In 1492, as Lorenzo de' Medici's death left Florence vulnerable, the Medici faced a storm that would test whether their legacy could endure faith, fury, and betrayal. Piero de' Medici, Lorenzo's heir, stepped into a city radiant with Renaissance glory but restless with discontent. At 21, he lacked his father's cunning, his indecision a crack in the Medici armor that enemies were eager to exploit. A Dominican friar, Girolamo Savonarola, emerged from Florence's shadows, his sermons a blaze of divine wrath. He condemned the Medici's opulence, calling for a city cleansed of sin, his voice igniting the hearts of the weary. Savonarola's vision was a theocracy, a new Jerusalem where art and wealth were sacrificed for salvation. To the people, he was a prophet. To the Medici, he was a thief, stealing the soul of their city. Piero's rule faltered as Savonarola's influence swelled, his words drawing crowds that once danced at Medici festivals. The friar's promise of purity drowned out the humanism that had defined Florence's golden age. In 1494, King Charles VIII of France marched south, his army a shadow over Italy's fractured states. Piero, panicked and weak, surrendered key territories, enraging Florence and handing Savonarola the city's heart. The people turned on Piero, looting Medici palaces and casting out the family that had shaped their world. Savonarola's theocracy rose, burning books and banning art, a stark rejection of the Renaissance the Medici had birthed. What does it mean to lose a legacy to the fervor of belief, to see your empire crumble under the weight of a single voice? The Medici, exiled and vilified, faced a Florence that no longer bore their name. Savonarola's rule, though fierce, was brittle, his strict decrees alienating the very souls he sought to save. In 1498, the Vatican struck, and Savonarola was hanged and burned, his ashes scattered to silence his legacy. Florence, freed but adrift, was a city torn between faith and the memory of Medici splendor. In this chaos, a new Medici rose, not in Florence, but in the Vatican, where power was both divine and treacherous. Giovanni de' Medici, Lorenzo's son, had been groomed for the church, a cardinal at 13, his mind a tapestry of diplomacy. In 1513, at 37, he seized the papacy as Pope Leo VI, wielding Medici wealth to claim Christendom's throne. Leo's Vatican was a stage of extravagance, where Raphael and Michelangelo painted his glory. Yet his lavishness drained the church's coffers, forcing him to sell indulgences to fund his Medici dreams. A German monk, Martin Luther, saw this as corruption, his 95 Theses a dagger aimed at the church's heart. Leo, blind to the threat, dismissed Luther, unaware his ideas would spark the Protestant Reformation. Luther's words fractured Christendom, a schism that shook the Medici's Vatican to its core. Leo's failure to act left his family's power vulnerable, a lesson in the cost of hubris. To secure the Medici future, Leo named his nephew Giulio Cardinal, hoping another pope would follow. In 1521, at 46, Leo died, his health broken by excess, leaving the Vatican in financial ruin. What is the price of glory when it blinds you to the cracks in your empire? Leo's reign elevated the Medici name, but it also sowed seeds of chaos that would haunt his successors. Giulio de' Medici, now Pope Clement VII in 1523, inherited a Europe torn by reformers and monarchs. His alliance with France against Emperor Charles V was a misstep, provoking the catastrophic sack of Rome in 1527. Rome fell in a storm of violence, its treasures looted, its people massacred. Clement, hiding in Castel Sant'Angelo, watched the Medici's Vatican burn, their grip on power slipping. In Florence, Clement's son Alessandro ruled with cruelty, his paranoia breeding enemies. In 1537, betrayed and murdered by his cousin, Alessandro's death plunged the city into chaos. To fall so far to see your name cursed is to confront the fragility of power itself. Yet from this darkness a young Medici emerged, determined to forge a new dawn. Cosimo de' Medici, just 17, was chosen as Florence's ruler, a puppet the elite thought they could control. But Cosimo was a strategist, his resolve honed in exile, his ambition a fire that would not be tamed. He crushed opposition, built a loyal guard, and restored order to a fractured Florence. By 1555, he conquered Siena, earning the title Grand Duke of Tuscany in 1569, transforming the Medici into true monarchs. Cosimo's Tuscany was a triumph, but his son Francesco I lacked his vision, his rule marred by scandal. As Tuscany weakened, another Medici, far from Italy, carried the family's name to new heights. Catherine de' Medici, born in 1519, grew up a pawn, her resilience forged in the crucible of captivity. At 14, she married Prince Henry of France, a union to bind the Medici to royalty, though she remained sidelined. In 1547, Henry became King Henry II, and Catherine, now queen, bore 10 children, her power confined to the nursery. In 1559, Henry's death in a jousting accident thrust her into the center of France's future. Catherine's son, Francis II, frail and young, died within 17 months, and his brother Charles IX, just 10, ascended. As regent, Catherine seized control, her Medici cunning a shield for a kingdom at war with itself. To rule through a child is to dance with chaos, where every choice risks ruin. Catherine balanced Protestant Huguenots and Catholic nobles, her diplomacy a web of calculated betrayals. Her pragmatism turned ruthless in 1572, when she ordered the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, killing thousands of Protestants. The bloodbath secured Catholic rule but stained her name with infamy. When Charles IX died in 1574, Henry III took the throne, his weakness a burden Catherine fought to overcome. Aging and desperate, she held France together, her health fading with each struggle. What does it mean to wield power when it demands your soul as payment? Catherine's rule was a triumph of will, but it left her legacy scarred, her heart heavy with sacrifice. In 1589, Catherine died, months before Henry III's assassination ended the Valois line. Her granddaughter Marie de' Medici briefly carried the family's blood, but the Medici's French saga faded. In Tuscany, the Grand Dukes clung to power, but corruption and weak rulers eroded their strength. By 1737, Gian Gaston de' Medici died without an heir, and Tuscany fell to Austrian control. The Medici dynasty, once architects of the Renaissance, vanished from power's stage. Yet their legacy endures in Florence's art, in Michelangelo's sculptures, in the very culture of modern Europe. Catherine's France bears her mark, her strategies shaping a nation through turmoil. Her story, like the Medici's, is one of creation amidst conflict, of building through blood and betrayal. The Medici were alchemists, turning chaos into beauty, ambition into eternity. Their rise and fall mirror the human quest to leave a mark, even as time erases the hand that made it. Florence's streets still echo with their patronage, the Uffizi and Duomo testaments to their vision. The Renaissance they ignited burns on, a flame that outlives the family that kindled it. To build a world is to believe in a future beyond your grasp, a faith that defies mortality. The Medici story asks us to weigh the cost of greatness and whether its price is ever repaid. What is the true measure of a legacy, its monuments, its triumphs, or the shadows it casts on those who follow? As the Medici fade into history, we must ask, what would you sacrifice to make your mark eternal?